Oris is an independent Swiss brand, and in being independent, it really allows the group, it allows the brand to pursue not only watches they're passionate about, but projects that are meaningful to the organization. So for years, they've worked with various nonprofit organizations, agencies, and corporations that help better various aspects of our globe, conservation efforts, preservation efforts, and the latest project that they have partnered with a nonprofit is the Billion Oyster Project for the Oris Aquis New York Harbor Limited Edition. Now, I was fortunate to get the invitation along with a number of other press members from around the globe to travel to the region, to go to New York City, and specifically take the ferry from the city to Governor's Island and hear the CEO of Oris, Rolf Studer, introduce the model, what sets it apart, and why it ties in to the Billion Oyster Project. So before I get to the specs and the model, the macro of the watch, let's talk about this nonprofit. The Billion Oyster Project was started in 2014, and it has the wonderful and lofty goal to introduce 1 billion live oysters into New York Harbor by the year 2035. Now that's important because the harbor has been devoid of oysters for years. It took less than 100 years of human habitation to completely dismantle the over 20,000 acres of natural oyster reefs that were in the harbor, years and years ago. That combined with sewage and trash that were dumped into the harbor, combined with corporations dredging and gouging out the harbor to make it deeper so that bigger boats could, go along the top of the waterways. It really became a rather sad, toxic, sorry waterway that no plant life or animal life or people want much to do with. So the Billion Oyster Project is important because they're reintroducing oysters, live oysters, into the harbor. Oysters can filter water. An adult oyster can filter 50 gallons of water by itself in one day. And so to create artificial reefs full of live oysters again, that will clean the water, that will take out nitrogen out of the water, that will help prevent algae blooms. The new reef system will help shield New York from storm surges. And overall, it will introduce biodiversity back into the harbor, leading to a cleaner and healthier system and ecosystem that we do want to be a part of, that we do want to spend time in and around. So it's a very important effort that I'm glad I got to spend just a very small portion of my time helping with. So members of the media, members of the press, along with Oris management, we were on Governor's Island and we helped sort through mounds of oyster shells, picking out trash, picking out silverware, picking out plastic, and helping prep the oysters for their travel through a machine that cleans them, takes out the dust, and cleans them to the degree that they can be placed in these artificial containers that simulate a natural oyster reef. And to be a part of that project, it was a lot of fun. It was a unique experience that I'll never forget. So I'm really glad I got to, spend a little bit of time doing that and seeing the process of getting oysters donated and placed on the island where they can dry out and cure and then clean and then being, placed in these artificial reefs so that a crane can drop them into strategic places within the harbor system to improve the health of the harbor. And again, I had a great time doing so. But now let's get back to the watch and why it ties in and how it ties in to this project. 41.5 millimeters of diameter with the 733 caliber within. That's a Sellita SW 200-1 base. And we have a green mother of pearl dial that again really looks sharp, especially in natural light. There's applied markers with BGW9 lume, a steel bezel insert with a relief pattern, and I think that helps accentuate the green hues of this mother of pearl dial. There is a fun case back showing 3 different oysters, an individual engraving to 2,000 pieces, the number of this limited edition, and the watch will retail for $2,700. Now, a portion of every one of the sales of this limited New York Harbor release will go toward that Billion Oyster Project because this nonprofit, they rely entirely upon donations for it to meet its goal. Now, again, the goal is 1 billion oysters by 2035. They are well on their way to that. They've introduced 75 million oysters to date, and they are on track to do 100 million by the end of this year, which takes them to 1/10 of their goal. So there's still a good amount of distance to go, and they are already seeing a difference in the health of the waterway. And I'll drop in a few pictures from the Billion Oyster Project website where they've noticed various animal life and plant life coming back into the harbor. So that's very promising. We're going in the right direction, but there's still a lot of work to do. And there are other ways for you to get involved. You can make a one-time donation to the nonprofit. You can become a member of the organization. Most importantly, I think you can volunteer your time if you're in the region, or perhaps if you travel to the region like I was fortunate to do, where you can go to Governor's Island and you can sort through the mounds of oyster and operate the cleaning machine and prep them for being placed in these artificial reef systems that are bringing health and life back into New York Harbor. Now, Oris is a brand. They have worked with a number of different environmental agencies and nonprofit organizations around the globe, as evidenced with many special and limited editions throughout the years. And I know some of you own a Lake Baikal, you own a Hung Ong edition, you have a Carysford Reef, or the Upcycle. There are multiple different models that tie into these groups. And personal opinion, from an aesthetic standpoint, from a watch enthusiast standpoint, I think this New York Harbor is the strongest design to date, with how it ties in to the environmental effort and just how sharp it looks aesthetically in natural light. I think this one's a special release that will sell out surprisingly quickly, even with a 2,000 unit production run. Now, lastly, I would like to mention that Oris, they were so kind in inviting me, along with other members of the press from around the globe, to cover this release, to participate in the service project, in the volunteer effort for this environmental cause. And I'd like to thank them. They were incredibly gracious hosts, as always. They took all of us to a Yankees game, which was really cool. This was my first time in New York City, and I loved the vibe. I loved the architecture, the history. There was a definite tangible feel to the region that has a unique identity, and I just really enjoyed myself. So thank you to Oris. Thank you to the Billion Oyster Project. Guys, if you'd like to get involved, if you'd like to purchase the watch, if you would like to donate, if you would like to volunteer time, perhaps you even run a restaurant nearby and you don't mind donating your used oyster shells, we need 1 billion of these shells over the next decade or so. I'll put links in the description of this video to where you can find the information you're looking for. Let me know if you have any specific questions. Thank you very much for watching today, and I'll see you guys next time.